Hi everyone, it's Toby from Toby's Urban Sketch. Thank you for joining me today. Today's video is all about sketching loosely. What does sketching loosely mean? How do we do it? How can we use our pens and our watercolors in an expressive fashion to get the most out of a short period of time sketching? If you enjoy my videos, please do hit the like and subscribe button because it's a huge help to my channel. And of course, please leave me a comment as well. So what is loose sketching? Well, loose sketching is not being tied down to the exact likeness of the image. It's being relaxed and comfortable and just letting things flow and producing something which is more expressive, so it still represents what's in front of you, but it's not the exact image. It's not photorealistic by any means necessarily. And why do we do that? Because it frees you up. It's quicker. You get less focused on the outcome and more involved in enjoying the process, and it gives you this wonderful, confident image. And how can we do that? Well, let's talk through a few tips as we sketch this very scene. So I'm going to use a 0.1mm pen, and I guess tip number one is using a finer pen is quite a nice way really of loosening up, because it gives you the confidence. You're not putting down a really bold mark. So if I just start sketching, we'll start from this big warehouse in the middle. You know, none of these lines are, well, they're permanent, but they're not so bold that I'm just absolutely gonna have to use them. I have to do things like this, but let's just draw a random line there and here. And then you'll see that by the end of this sketch, they're not really important. They're actually probably just adding a little bit of fun and texture. And then we can do the same when we're drawing like these shapes like this. This tree's got an interesting shape, and I don't have to get it right first time. I'm just being loose and trying to get the impression of this tree. I can go round and round, and look, we already lost some of these random marks I made. So just using a thin pen is tip number one for loosening up, at least in your first sketch, and that just enables you to make these lovely loose marks, these wibbly wobbly marks. My other tip with the pen work is just go for it, really. You might sort of worry that if you just go for it, something bad will happen. It won't look exactly like the photo, but it doesn't matter. We're not after something which looks exactly like the photo because we've got the photo. We're after just something we produced which represents it, and that, you know, that's fun and interesting. So as I'm talking, you know, I can already see that because I've got distracted, I've missed out a whole segment of this sketch. That's fine, because what we can do, I can just adapt it and be like, well, you know what, let's put a wall in. And then I quite like this sort of parallel building, so I'm gonna just move it. I'll put it over here. We can put this building in here, and then these little loose marks I've been using are easy to join up because they're not set on stone. They're not bold and challenging. We can even just, you know, let's take this really big building and then pop it over here, and then put this nice chimney it's got. You know, I've got this contour wrong, this angle wrong, so I'll change it because my pen work is nice and loose. And then it's got another building in front. So already I've diverged fairly significantly from the reference photo. I'm certainly using the photo to guide what I'm doing, and I didn't set out my intention to change the scene as I have, but my focus today isn't on getting this scene perfect. It's on enjoying what I'm doing, on having a chat with you guys, and on producing something which I enjoyed producing. And if it looks wonderful, great. great. If it doesn't, which it often doesn't, then you know what, I've learnt something. I've had fun anyway. So I suppose that is tip number 3, or perhaps that should have been tip number 1. Just decide that, you know, when you do whatever you do today or tomorrow, that you're just gonna experiment and not be too focused on oh, does it look good? Is it good enough? That kind of question. Just let yourself enjoy the process and try something new. I think you will often find if you stare really closely at something, which is what you're doing the whole time when you're drawing, at least, all you can see are the mistakes, because it's just too easy to focus on them. But if you're just coming to something fresh, it's really easy to not see them and to see, you know, it's the sort of brilliance or the beauty of it. Something which often happens for me, for example, is if I'm looking through Instagram, I can look at someone's work and be like, oh, that's amazing, and I'll save it, and then I'll look closer and I can go, you know, if I'd done this, I might not be happy with it, and actually it's really good. But I'm amazed the way that they've done these free brush strokes and things, and the boldness they've left, or whatever, you know, the pen work they've used, things like that. But if it was me, I'd be like, oh, why haven't I done this more refined or better? So yeah, tip number 3, to just let yourself enjoy the process. Don't get sucked into the minutiae. Now, I should probably talk a little bit about what I'm doing here. So just bringing in the very front plane and getting in this idea of this dry brick wall. So this photo is from Yorkshire. It's when myself and my girlfriend Tash were walking some of the Pennine Way, and so these are the classic brick walls you get in that area of the country, God's own country as they call it. And then they get these lovely sort of higgledy-piggledy wooden sticks on top. And again, look how many sticks are there in the photo. There's about 8, 9. There's 6 in mine, and I've got the idea, not got exactly what's going on. And then with this wall, I mean, I believe it looks like what it should look like, in the sense that it's a series of geometric shapes with a rough edge and random areas of shadow and random areas of light, and it's a bit up and down, and that's all we're trying to achieve, is to get the likeness, much like with this tree. It's the essence of the tree, it's not the exact tree in that photo. And remember, if it wasn't a photo, if you were there sketching in person, you could have been at any angle, the wind could have blown the tree in any way, so the tree could have looked like anything, not quite anything, but you know what I mean. It could have looked a huge range of ways, so getting too focused on the exact tree or the exact wall or anything, these things change so dramatically. It's just not worth it, in my eyes anyway. I'm now going to just go back round. So we started with this really loose sketch, and we've already got quite a lot of shape, I would say. I'm actually quite happy with how it's come out, even though I've been wittering away. But I'm now just going to go round and just bolden up some lines. So we've gone loose, and we're sticking with loose, so I'm still making these sort of random connecting lines. But we can also go, you know, where can we just embolden our looseness and embrace some of the lines we've made. And you see how things just start to come forward, and those sort of random lines we've made previously suddenly become lovely textures rather than sort of features of the landscape itself. I'm just going to build the base of this wall in as well. Just get, you know, a little edge of it. And I guess tip number 4 is when you're trying to draw something, especially if something's like almost a long straight edge, just introduce some randomness. So these little lines are my attempt at getting the idea of a rough wall meeting some grass. And I'm not putting any real thought into it, I'm just flicking away and moving around. And I am talking to you as I sketch, so all of this stream of consciousness is going on whilst I also try and concentrate on the sketching. So you can tell that I can't be paying that much attention to exactly what I'm doing, which is why I made this amusing mistake where I've moved some buildings and missed out a whole segment. And then just have a little look and see, are there things we want to add in from the scene? So we've got some lovely windows and things dotted around. And then maybe we want to invent some windows, and maybe on this large building we kind of have to invent something because it doesn't strictly exist. So let's pop in another window, say. And here maybe we want a door. We haven't got a door yet, and that just, at least someone can get into one of these buildings. And then maybe we want to add a little bit of texture, or a little bit of texture and contrast. So we can do that with a little bit of hatching. And we can just pick our areas which are nice and shadowed. And this is another way of just being nice and loose, is approaching this initial texture, this initial contrast with just some sort of rough hatching, and not trying to get it neat. So it's sort of neatish, but it's not parallel. Some of the lines are different lengths, and that's fine. It's all just implying texture and interest and showing what I think of this sort of overall scene. We can do a similar thing with the trees, but to show that they're different, they're natural things, natural tone, not a man-made object. Instead of hatching, we can do squiggles. So there you go. Tip number 5, I think we're up to, is rather than focusing really heavily on exact bits of contrast, exact textures, just use these loose ways of applying texture, loose hatching, loose squiggles, very loose wiry squiggles, and we can unify those a bit. So if we use them in more than one place, things suddenly start to make a bit more sense. So let's get this tree at the side, and maybe just, this is grass, right? So this is also a natural thing. So maybe this grass, we also add texture with little squiggles. And I haven't said it yet, I can't believe I haven't said it. I think I mentioned it once, and this is definitely a tip for loosening up, is just connect things. So these lines, just, they join up, and even when they're a little bit faint or they're discontinuous, you can sense where the join would be. And all the time I was joining up these buildings, as I was doing this line work, there's joins everywhere, and that just brings a sort of element of connectedness, of simplicity to the image. Your eye doesn't have to pick out 100 different objects, it's sort of one shape. And when you see a scene like this, that's what your eye sees. You don't, I don't know, I challenge you to have looked at this reference photo and immediately understand the number of buildings. Whereas what you've actually probably done is seen, oh look, it's obviously a collection of farm buildings from the shape, from the overall shape. And then you let your eye do that, you connect everything, you don't introduce complexities that your eye doesn't naturally see in scenes. So yeah, I love connecting things, I love doing it with colours, I love doing it with the pen, and I think it really adds something to sketching and makes it really approachable as well, especially if you're not having to just specifically draw everything. And just continuing some of these ideas we've been talking about now, just to get a bit of these kind of ideas of contrast, where particularly where our different planes of the image, we've kind of got a foreground, a middle ground plane. This is kind of our focal point over here, with a secondary focal point running along here, which kind of fits with our rule of thirds. And then we've got just this sort of mid-ground plane as well. So they're all nicely separated. And I think that's enough penwork, and I think it's quite a nice bit of penwork as well, actually. So let's move on to the colours. So if I start, where are we up to? Tip number 7 for colour would be, and being loose, would be loads of water. Let the colours paint themselves. Watercolours will paint themselves if you give them just a little bit of freedom. So I'm going to use my big flat brush. This is a 1-inch brush. Just a synthetic flat brush. And we're going to get some nice water flowing across this page. And we're not going to try and paint the whole page. So tip number 8 is don't think you have to paint everything, because you really don't. And leaving things to the imagination can be just as powerful, if not even more powerful, than painting everything beautifully. So I've left some nice gaps, and I brought it down, the water's down to these buildings. I just took it a little bit further than I wanted, so I can use a little sponge or tissue to bring that up. And I'm going to pop, we got quite an overcast sort of sky there, and this is, in the bottom of my palette here, this is some moon glow, which is a really lovely colour for these moody British skies. I've done a couple of videos on this as well, so do have if you want to know more about how I approach skies, do have a little look out for them, and I'll try and pop a little link to them on the screen and things like that, or in my description. So just have a little look around, and hopefully I'll have done that. And then, as well as loads of water, just allow that randomness, some splashes, and then where do the splashes go, and then we can join up those splashes. So that's tip number 9. We're getting towards having done all our tips now, but just embrace some randomness, just appreciate what random colouring can do to just enhance your sketching a bit. Part of that is why I like leaving my palette dirty. Partly it's because I'm a bit lazy, and then I've learnt to embrace my laziness and work with it and enjoy the outcomes of it. And partly it's because I do enjoy the outcomes of it. Having these colours, I can see all this range of colours. I don't have to think, oh, how am I going to make this bright cobalt into something murky? I can go, oh, look at this murky mix I've got here, and then I can pop it in. That's a nice sort of warm but murky orange, which just lightens up the sky, say. And then I can also just bring out some of my favourite colours and pop them in. I'm not going to encourage you to do this, because I think too many artists out there would tell me off, but if you do, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Tip number 10 for being loose with your sketching with your colours is have a tissue or a sponge or something on hand, because when things go wrong, and they always go wrong even if you're being careful, with watercolours it's great to be able to immediately lift off that colour. And beyond that, I don't think something's gone wrong here, but I can use it to just create shapes. I can create, you see in the reference you've got this sort of triangle of light coming in. Well, I can use my sponge or a tissue to create that by just picking up some of the colour. And there's another sort of shape coming in here. And then I can use it to pick up some of this excess water. Just soak it up there. And over here. And I'm going to leave some of this water and even just drag it down, because we're going to use that to make some connections like we were talking about. But first, having made these lovely little areas of light, I'm going to get a bit more of our dark pigment, and we're going to emphasize those areas with a few splashes, with some more purposeful work, maybe even with a little bit of blue just to really create some colour. And look at this effect with the water on my brush, just creating a bit of a cauliflower there. And that's sort of creating a really nice effect, which I wasn't expecting. This really bright blue on this moody sky is actually really nice. So just by using randomness, by creating some shapes and by letting things flow, I've got something I could never hope to do on my own. Now the next thing I'm going to do is, like I said, link things up. So we've got this tree, which is really nice. We've got this whole natural skyscape. We've got all these man-made objects, and then we've got these this tree which kind of links natural down to natural, and we just use this water bridge. A little bit of, this is a mix of chromium green, which is quite dark, and a sap green, which is more, I guess, vivid, more well, I don't know how to describe it anymore. My words have gone, but it's a lighter green anyway. And just by doing that mix, we get some interesting variations in our little wash. And just again leaving those little white areas. I'm going to now add some green up here in our background field, and I'm going to connect it a little bit and leave some of our fence white and let some of it absorb these colours, and just pop some of these splashes in as well, especially in the foreground, because I'm going to leave this foreground unpainted. But it's not lacking colour, is it? In the image it's not lacking colour at all. It's actually got some warm greens and things going on, but I don't want to overpower the eye. If I pop a load of warmth and in a flat wash along here, then your eye will just get stuck here and never get to this interesting bit. So this is what I was talking about, not feeling you have to paint everything. Don't have to paint the whole sky, don't have to paint the whole image. And then that also comes on to, I guess, tip number 11, which is, as well as just sort of not painting everything fully, leave some purposeful negative space in there. So these buildings are looking really interesting left as they are. What I'm going to do is dry the image off, so I'm going to quickly, bear with me while I use my hairdryer to do this. Okay, so mostly dry, just with a few seconds. Obviously these big pools of water are still wet, but that's fine because they'll just let these random interesting accidents keep happening whilst we work more carefully in other areas. So I'm going to get some bolder green this time, less water, more pigment, still using our same mix of two greens, and I'm just going to start focusing in on our tree, and again just linking it down here. And then this foreground's actually quite I was going to say it's darker, but I'm completely wrong. It's actually much lighter, isn't it? So we can reflect that. So rather than making a darker green, I'm going to pop a load of yellow into my green, which will lighten it up, give that sort of straw-like feel. And we just go around and just bring it, using light sort of strokes of perspective, so strokes that fit in with the way the field is running. So it's sort of running this way and then this way. That just lets you get the shape, and we can just pop in those lines and create texture at the same time, and then maybe bring in some of that darker green and just drop it around and see what happens. And then in the background it certainly is darker, a bit more gloomy, so I mixed up my moon glow there with some of my green, and I want to connect it a bit more. This big white gap is not quite realistic, is it? So we connect it a little bit more, and I'm going to let that green balloon into the sky here, and if we bring that tree in the background, just get it a little bit of colour, maybe a little bit of this green there again, and there we go. We've got loads of just interesting things going on. Just going to test with my finger. So the sky's fairly dry now, but I think if we just pop some splashes and just doing this in a really loose way, what I want to be able to do is introduce a little bit more tone into the sky in a few places, but without it looking too forced. So the splashes let me then come in with the brush, soften everything up. It will leave a few edges, but it's not forced, not artificial, because of the randomness of the splashes. And then we can just get it even darker in some of these places. Okay. So this is coming together quite nicely now. I'm going to add a little bit of tone to some areas of the wall. And then we can reflect that tone in other walls. So the one at the back. And then also in these areas we've hatched. So we're suddenly introducing not colour but shadow to the man-made objects, which gives them shape and presence without, you know, without necessarily taking away the fact that there is this negative space, this kind of looming horizon. And just vary the strength of the pigment here and there, and get that wall nicely as well, and then again just drop some of it in here and in here. Maybe where the shadows are a bit too uniform we can drop some green in, like this murky green, to reflect a bit of that interesting randomness. Okay. And then just step back and have a look. So that how are we doing? How is this scene looking? Is it progressing where we want? You know, don't get focused on too many details. You know, I think it is. It's looking really good. I don't want to do too much else to it. This is a bit too defined for me, so I'm just going to come in and get those greens to balloon into the sky and across some of these buildings. I want to connect the tree. I want it to be natural. I want it to be this bridge between the sky and the land. But I don't want it just to sit there as this dark green monolith. So I think that's probably enough. And I'm going to just go again quickly and dry off this area so we could do our final pen bits. There we go. So, again, not completely dry, but that is fine for me. And I specifically just dried around the focal point, because what I want to be able to do is come back in, again, and sticking with the loose theme, redo some of our lines. And I guess what I mean by loose this time is, although they're bold, although they're more certain, I'm not worrying about completely going over the previous lines. In fact, again, we can purposefully introduce wiggles and things like that. And we can purposefully miss the lines and expand on them or go under them. And all that's doing is creating this texture between the different lines, bringing things forward but leaving depth behind them. And where I've missed out windows with my colour, I can use my bolder work now to fill that colour in. Maybe even where I have coloured them I can add a bit of depth with a bold black line. And my chimney here, this can have a line. See, just getting to make some more little fun decisions about where to add a little bit more boldness and bring things forward by outlining them more clearly. And maybe all these sticks at the front, for example, when you look at them, it'd be good if they stood out a little bit more actually, because they're an interesting part of the landscape. So let's just use our pen to, again, I'm not being like really neat about this, I'm just hatching them in or roughly scribbling them in. And I think that is me done. So if you'll allow me one more rule just before we get to 30 minutes, it's just don't feel that you have to keep going and keep going. I'm sure there's things I could do to quote unquote improve this, but I've enjoyed the process this far. I don't want to get to the point where it's overworked, where I feel I've ruined something. I feel I've really captured what what, trust me, was an interesting day. If you've ever walked the Pennine Way, or if you've ever gone on a long walk in Yorkshire, you'll know what I mean. It can be an interesting day, and I think this perhaps captures the emotions I remember, somewhere between beautiful and tornado. But this is my sketch. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you've enjoyed my 12 tips for how to loosen up with pen and with watercolour. If you do enjoy my videos, please do like and subscribe. It's a huge support for my little channel. And thank you for watching, and have a really good day.